Hello. Let's see if this is streaming to the thingy. Can I see myself? Real question. Yes. Yes, I can. Quite problematic, too. Right when I decided to look. This stream is up. I think I am live. And so I'm just going to keep going with it. Advanced audio properties. You know, anytime you're streaming through OBS, you always got to remember that it only accepts one audio channel, so make sure everything goes to one audio channel. That's the one you're streaming to. Alright, I haven't been able to say anything for almost 2 weeks now. 2, 3, give or take. I don't know. I don't know, I felt the need to stop posting on my Instagram. Alright, I should do an intro. Hi, my name's Jose Ramirez. Friends call me Ogie, Rami, Jay. Most recently, I've been actually called Frog Bear, which is hilarious in my opinion. What else? I haven't really done anything else besides that. I haven't showed up to the podcast. I've kept up with the news, obviously, because I can't turn that part of my brain off. Being aware is something I've learned to be accustomed to. Yeah, not much. I've been working on art. I've been working on a series of Pepes that I plan on putting on Sologenic, which is a sort of like a cryptocurrency thing. I've also been doing art that I plan on selling to a specific I don't even know. Basically making artwork for t-shirts. Hopefully they like it. I've also been going through all of my notes that I've taken, like ever since I started like paying attention to not just like the Q stuff, but when I actively started paying attention to what was going on politically and culturally. So I have notes from 2017. I dug out the hard drive that I used to have from my old computer when that one got fried. Kind of funny because that computer got fried right around the time that I was researching something that had to do with there was this rule change. Gina Hasberg was basically trying to change the rules of secrecy, where if there was a mission that had an agent, like if a certain mission or certain projects had certain agents that were still commissioned into the field, basically those files would never actually get declassified because the agent was still active on field. Gina was trying to change that so it was indefinitely, regardless of whatever agent was hired, commissioned, and or involved with any proceedings. It would make it so that any mission file and anything was like permanently, what do you want to call it? You know, like blackbarred. Make sure nobody could read that mission file, even though these agents had already been decommissioned. Like they wanted to go as early as the OSS, which was the original name for the intelligence office. Can't remember the exact name, but it was before they changed it to CIA, and it was around the time that they facilitated the handling of certain German assets into America. You know, Project Paperclip, blah blah blah, the usual. Yeah, that computer fried. I still remember that because I just couldn't turn it on. But I was using really old equipment, and it was around the time that Intel had a leak where basically China had figured out through old chipsets in motherboards, basically Intel chipsets, that I thought it was just a funny coincidence that those two things correlated at the time. Because one thing is for sure, I do not believe the Chinese intelligence had anything to do with that. Only because, like, you just have to know how, like, the internet works, where like data feeds come through, and anything that comes through China's kind of funneled through the Hawaii office. There's like an NSA branch office in Hawaii, and they're the ones that usually handle any data incoming and outgoing from the country through that office. Quite popular. It was in the Snowden movie with Jordan Glover, that Levy guy, the Levy guy who was in 300 Days of Summer. I don't even know. All right, I was trying to talk about like current events. One of my favorite current events that actually happened recently was first you had a few people that were officials in the office of what do you want to call it, the UK government, the English government. First they had a few people resign. I think it was like 3 of them. And then Boris Johnson was like, "Oh, it was unquestionable that I allowed this individual into my cabinet, da 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 da, whatever." Next thing you know, right, a few days later, you had 50 people, over 50 people, just drop out of their government. Rome is on fire. Sri Lanka is getting a revolution. Argentina is losing it. Netherlands is losing it. It's just, we're watching, I think it was Colombia too. I don't remember. Check out the Telegram. I haven't even posted anything in the Telegram. I've been posting, like, here's the thing, right? I have such a, if I want to save something for reference at a later time, I will save links. Like, even though I told myself not to post on my Instagram, even though I told myself not to post on the Telegram, right? I just told myself actively stop. Like, don't do that shit. I still couldn't stop myself from like posting it in like a personal Discord group that I have, just because like I like keeping track of certain data because it adds to my argument. It's very relevant to what I like thinking about. I don't know. Either way, still posted a lot of that stuff. So after, what was it? Right, British government total collapse. Sri Lanka total collapse. There's various parts of the world that are just losing their stuff. But I can't remember, I think it was at the beginning of the farmer protest of the Netherlands that there were videos circulating of their prime minister. I think the one that stuck out to me the most was he was giving the press or a newspaper company like tour of his office, and he's just like, "Hey, look up there." And like right at the entrance of the conference room where business is handled, right at the entrance of the conference room, there's like a head of a goat. Not that I'm like suggesting anything, but very interesting that you have the head of the goat there. But I don't know, very interesting things. Just coincidences that line up. I was watching an older episode of Sam Tripoli. It's like episode 24, Subliminal Seduction. The Subliminal Seduction is the name of a book. And this book is like hella famous for advertisement purposes because it basically describes a lot of the early advertising culture of, using subliminal messaging or sexual messaging and, to catch the subconscious mind of whoever you're trying to market to and get them to buy your product because you're associating these deep underlying right? They're subliminal because they're hiding it in the image. But in reality, what they're doing is they're setting up like a Pavlov's experiment where they're not creating a condition, right? That's the thing with Pavlov's dog. They created the condition. No, they just studied humanity and they know the conditions that cause certain stimuli in the head. Very different approach to science. So yeah, you know what I mean? Like the hiding of phallic symbols in Disney princess movies, da 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 da, blah 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 blah. I think what's more dastardly is the fact that like there's more psychological subliminal things that happen in a lot of these Disney movies, and it's not necessarily dicks everywhere or like sexual innuendo. It's more our expectations of how interactions occur between like one person, the next person, etc., etc. Very interesting. Because I have spoken about like hyper reality, where a lot of people have associated certain expectations of Hollywood and applied it to their reality. So it kind of goes into what I've wrote down in the description, where a lot of people right now are doom and gloom, World Economic Forum. They're going to control it all. Blah, 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 blah. And I would, if I didn't know what occurred, right? If I had just still had my head under a rock from 2018 and on, yeah, I would also blindly agree that, yeah, they're winning, that this war is only one-sided. Charles Schwab clearly is going to get everybody to eat the bugs. It's very one-sided if anybody looks at it that way. And in reality, it's not so constrict or conformed to such a thing. Because I paid attention to what occurred in 2018. I don't know where a lot of people were. Like, if you didn't pay attention to what culturally occurred in 2018, which is the culture revolution, where you started seeing an earthquake, you saw the foundation of where people were standing on crumble, kind of causing a split between both, right? It's a foundation. Just imagine if, like, you had a piece of land, a rift is caused between these two pieces of land. But the rift, or at least the platform that people are standing on, is artificial. There's ground underneath. What we're currently watching is people's optics, people's beliefs, people's reality shelters. I don't know what you want me to call it. Like, right, everybody who's living in the pod is running a simulation, but that simulation is interconnected with every other pod, right? So think of that foundation everybody was standing on in 2018 as that. You were all standing on a faulty piece of foundation. There's ground underneath. You shouldn't freak out. Like, everything's going to be okay. But because everybody tends to build their life on this faulty ass foundation, the moment it started to crumble, that's where you saw the media react, trying to create optics between two different sides. This actually ties in with a really great book that I was thinking of reading. It's called Inheriting America, or Inheriting... I can't even remember the name of the book, but it's basically some woman decided to write a book about people's... So the people who founded the nation of America, right, after the Declaration of Independence, she decided to do a study on the people that were born not under British tyranny, but they were born early enough into America, and she followed their lives towards what she considers the end of that inheritance of America, because, you had a lot more people coming in, et cetera, who cares? But she describes that during this portion of the creation of America, a lot of the founding fathers, or at least the people who were pushing for whatever foundation was occurring at that time, they set up the stage for the Civil War by not addressing certain issues, right? The North abolished slavery, and then the South, right? Like, they destroyed slavery where it was weakest, but left it where it was strongest. And because of that, they essentially set up the stage for the Civil War. I was going to say Civil Revolution, like, what the fuck? But it was because, again, nobody foresaw that. At that time, nobody knew that, like, hey, if we abolish slavery here and if we don't do it over there, like, everything's going to go to shit and people are just going to kill each other. Nobody knew that. But because they created enough of an ideological and social difference between these two different parts of the land, you basically allowed the creation of building blocks for excuses. Not excuses for people who want to cause a war. I'm just saying, like if you leave bricks, someone's going to use them. Like, you know what I mean? It was like, I think it was in Dallas, right? There was like a BLM protest or something that was going on. And then, like, randomly, there's just these pallets of bricks that just show up everywhere. Oh, dude, total coincidence, right? But in this case, the book, Inheriting America, it's a very simple book. It's not trying to describe any crazy conspiracy. I just found it interesting that there is a book talking about how you can actually categorize um, the people who inherited America, the people who were born here, the people who didn't have to experience British rule, but it was early enough that they knew what had occurred before them. So I just found the book fascinating from that perspective of that somebody decided to write a piece of literature that way, because it's currently where we're at now. At least you can write a book describing Gen X to Gen Z and how vastly different, but how similar they are to the generations before us, right? Because I think, what was it, like all the Gen X kids were born from people that were born in the 60s, right? People who got to experience all the like the 70s, like rock and roll, a very edgy phase of life, a push against traditionalism, a push against progressivism. See what I'm saying? Very interesting to see all these things occur in such a fast motion. But that's kind of where I come in. That's kind of where I think my wheelhouse is, you know, me seeing from the inside, being a part of internet culture, why the Hillary campaign failed. But it wasn't just the Hillary campaign failing. A lot of it was so I kind of saw Libya happen. I also saw the Scientology thing happen, and I saw Egypt when they lost the internet. But I also saw Reddit lose Ellen Powell, previous CEO, around 2012. All of these events had one thing in common, and that was the internet and the freedom of speech that it had provided these groups of people. But it also all revolved around a single entity, and that was WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. And the fact that, like, I look at today's age, and nobody likes to talk about that. Nobody likes to talk about how Julian Assange ties into not only hacker culture, not only the culture war that actually, right? The culture war essentially happened with Obama, because they saw this emerging rhetoric that had occurred when Obama had bailed out these banks. When all that happened, what they saw occur was a class revolution, which is something they did not want. So instead of it being like, I still remember the rhetoric, which was the 99 versus the 1%. And now that whole rhetoric has flipped. Now it's like, right, that statistic is no longer the same, because now they've changed the statistic too, with the new political emerging group that they have with Turning Point USA, which is, if you earn over $40,000 a year, you are a part of that 1%. Completely changing the sphere of the narrative, of the rhetoric that was going on. Very interesting the way I saw this kind of just divulge into what it is now. And there is only one group that was fully aware of how all of these things were, I don't know, I want to say the word transpiring, but with the way things played out, there, in my head, there is only one group of people that could understand all of this. All of this. And that's what Nicholas Machiavelli would describe as intelligentsia. Intelligence. One of the oldest intelligence groups in at least modern history, modern Catholic Jesuit educational institution history, would suggest the Templars. The Templars were kind of one of the first groups that essentially created these forms of networks that allowed for the sharing of information. And funnily enough, it was also the Templars that were one of the first. They essentially created like the first systems for allowing the transfer of money between like one country to another country, and they were using like carrier pigeons as a form of communication, because they were pre-funding little chapels, and while pre-funding each chapel along the way, the carrier pigeon was like, "Hey, so and so gave us this much gold in this chapel, whatever. Fulanito uno, give him that much money when you see this bird. Oh shit, dude! All right, here's your bird, dog. Really weird early inception of things. The reason why that makes sense is because everything we've seen happen, everything that we've seen occur, has had a central point, and it's one of the oldest sayings. And I always thought that it was dated and it didn't really matter, but all roads lead to Rome. And okay, weird synchronicity. Around the time I was thinking about that, not how I was thinking about that, but just me thinking, I started noticing that there were these weird fires in Rome, and I'm just thinking to myself like, oh, this is very interesting. But right, YouTube, all forms of media, all forms of entertainment, whatever you want to call it, anything I watch, the people I watch, the things I listen to, everything, nobody at all had said what it was for what it was. And, the media, various other outlets would say it's protesters, it's the civil unrest. And there's a lot of civil unrest, because I will not downplay that at all. I've been actually I keep tracks. Well, I keep tracks. Yeah, I'll keep them tracks. Nah. I do keep track of seeing what occurs in Italy because of some of the Telegram groups that I follow. But dude, those citizens are pissed. They'll actively yell at members of parliament, at members of the I think they have a prime minister. I'm not too sure if they have a prime minister, but they'll actively go out of their way, find these government officials, and harass the fuck out of them, just because of everything from the handling of the yib, from the handling of the what do you want to call it, like redlining, from the handling of everything that we've seen occurred in these last 2 years, practically, right? 2020, 2019. Yeah, because it was towards the end of 2019 that all this kind of started occurring. And that is the equivalent. I thought it was hilarious that nobody kind of put two and two together, that is the equivalent to the Nuremberg trials. Like, what I saw occur from a cultural, like a wartime perspective, right? If I were to give an assessment of player A, player B, or at least give actors A, B, C, D, right? Who gains what? There's always an angle to everything, and if you haven't paid close enough attention to that, you haven't paid close attention to it at all, like you wouldn't even know what a tiny hat is, right? Like, you got to be up with the times, because even these aspects and these forms of intelligentsia, these intelligence groups, every single nation, every single meaningful player, I don't think, here's a big tell. Every meaningful player that has anything to gain in anything has a form of intelligence gathering. All of them do. All of them either have intelligence brokers or forms and ways of getting intelligence from whatever country they're about to deal with. The United States is, I would say, the largest, but even they're handicapped. And they're largely handicapped because there's an even bigger intelligence group that we can't talk about, obviously, because, oh Lord, for I have sinned, because I of course you would never use any of this information that I give you against me. Not at all. Meanwhile, one of the islands that Epstein owned was called Little St. James. Like, why would you use the word saint in the name of the island? Either way. And here's the funny thing, right? Anytime there's been like an offshoot or like something similar to a mercenary group, anytime they model their intelligence group, who do they model it after? Anytime they have like what do you want to call it? A spy group or an intelligence group. Who do they model it after? The SS was modeled after who? The Jesuits. The OSS was modeled after the Jesuits. Like, I can't remember. Russia's KGB modeled after the Jesuits. It's almost like there's almost like a thing that connects all of these. Very interesting. But either way, I'm just paying attention to what's currently going on with Oh no, this is kind of weird. I just noticed that there's a 1 there now. Yeah. Intelligence groups, intelligentsia. BRICS. Essentially, I was going with BRICS. BRICS is this new alliance that is occurring between, right, BRICS, Brazil, China, no, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Singapore? Was it Singapore? I know there's an S at the end of that. No, Saudi Arabia. Right? BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and Saudi Arabia have all joined in an alliance to make a new form of currency. If you don't know who Gaddafi was, he was somebody who wanted to do something similar, but he wanted to unite all of Africa together to create the United States of Africa. Well, that didn't occur at all. Actually, Gaddafi got killed, and the person responsible for that ran for president, and everybody hailed her as a saint during the 2016 election, even though she purposefully destroyed a country who wanted to seek sovereignty. Yeah, she's a great lady. Either way, BRICS basically creating an alliance between themselves for the transferring of money. And it's almost like we saw this coming since Russia got kicked off of the SWIFT system. So as people want to say doom and gloom, World Economic Forum, this and that, I'm like, we can clearly see that there's another player in the space, in this playing field, who is amassing an alliance with the very people that Biden has to kiss ass to for oil. Meanwhile, Biden refuses to open up any of the oil fields in America. Actually, when he got into office, he closed them all. Just like, so people want to assume that, like, oh, cryptocurrencies, World Economic Forum, Charles Schwab, that doom and gloom, that everything's going to collapse and it's all going to go in ownership or this or that towards Bill Gates and towards any of these elitists. And I'm just thinking to myself, I get it. America's going to be the dead last, literally dead last in this race for revolution. But it will occur, in my opinion. It's kind of funny because it's usually the most educated ecclesiastical that think themselves so right that they'll be last to accept the truth. Meanwhile, every other country that doesn't have that same statistic is now kind of offsetting it by overthrowing their leaders. It's almost like, I don't even want to go there. Education. Yes. It's amazing. Institutional science. You should trust the science. Nothing could go wrong. It's not like, it's not that the science is wrong. It's just that the money that is incentivizing the science is where it always goes wrong. Always. Like the fact that people don't question the fact that all of the Ukraine, alright, so the Ukraine biolabs, funniest shit ever. Hunter Biden was the liaison of that. Like there's flight log records of him going to Ukraine and then facilitating certain deals between certain groups. Well, all it really takes is who sat down at that meeting. Let's Google who they are. Oh, they're associated with what now? Oh my. It's almost like this 2019. It's almost like this medical emergencies were always on the table as a form of social coercion, social control, because religion no longer works. And the fact that, like, the moment all the Bible thumpers, the moment that all the people center and the people who are religious decided to not vote for the Democratic candidate, they got thrown under the bus. They no longer count in political sphere, right? Like their opinions, they started cooking the polls after that, which was what, 2016. Then we had happened 2018. I'm losing myself in a thought here. Yeah, doom and gloom, World Economic Forum. People are saying that we're gonna eat the bugs. I don't believe that shit. Like, why would I believe that if I'm actively looking at another country actively work against the what do you want me to call it, the interest, right? Russia is literally working against the absolute interest of the World Economic Forum. He's making moves against them. The fact that our United States leaders are still not retaliating against the Chinese empire should let you know that we aren't going to do anything about this. So, if anybody's working for Russia, who's working for Russia? Is it Biden or was it Trump? Who facilitated these sorts of things to happen? Because the way I look at it, one group of people never wanted to facilitate anything related to China or anything related to Russia. If anything, we greased up the hands of Saudi Arabia and we were like, yo, what up? Like, we homies now? All right, cool. That's literally what happened. When Biden rolls into office, it's almost like he could do nothing but just watch the country burn. Watch as China bought their position for what do you want to call it? Global consumer production. Right? They wanted to return to what they used to be, which was the production house of the world. I don't know if people know this, but China at the time was probably the only producers of porcelain, fine porcelain, glassware. What do I want to say? Like the 1800s. Before the opium wars started, China was actually known as the production house of the world. They produced goods for everybody. Everybody. Literally the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese. I don't know. It depends on what you know about history and naval warfare, but that's another topic for another day. So to watch the house of cards fall, and remember, this World Economic Forum, this elitist group of 300 or whatever you want to call it, people who essentially control the economic infrastructure, only ever used one system, and that's the SWIFT system. All money around the world was always transferred using a single system. Never anything else. One single system for every single bank across the world. There was only one way to do it. Even MoneyGram, PayPal, like even these offshoot providers of like, you know, people who transfer money, they think that they're not susceptible to SWIFT, but they are. Like all money that PayPal handles, if it's within the United States, they'll handle it and they can work by it. But anytime that money has to leave the nation and leave the country, that's a whole other issue. That's literally a whole other issue. Because if you do not have any affiliations with banks, financiers, or people who can provide the actual physical money, the liquidity for all that, you're literally susceptible to SWIFT. And like, yeah, good luck trying to take $1 million from one part, right? If you take $1 million to Russia, yeah, you could take $1 million to Russia, but that doesn't mean somebody has $1 million worth of rubles to give you right then and there. Like there's chokeholds of money and the providence of it. So the fact that our financial infrastructure is moving away from a singular entity and what's being put in place is an interoperable system that can communicate with a variety of different networks. What the fuck makes you think that any one of these elite fucks could control that entire system? If anything, we just recently saw the Supreme Court actually give a decision on that, which is if an entity or an organization controls the network and they want administrative privileges, they have to control aspects of it. There's requirements now. In order for your blockchain or your network to have administrative privileges, well, you kind of have to control the circulating supply, first off. And then you also have to control the consensus mechanism that's used for it. Yeah, I want to see a single bank literally try to own all of a single cryptocurrency. Yeah, good luck with that one. And then good luck trying for them to. Yes, there are aspects of them being able to buy out the developers, but there are very few developers that understand these systems as well as they do. I really doubt that they're going to look at the bank and be like, yeah, dude, I want to work for you. Instead of, you don't really own much of my circulating supply. All of your money and value is actually locked up in a lot of these contracts. It's locked up in a lot of these liquidity pools. So how are you going to just give me funny money and I give you something that's actually worth something? Like, how does that like work out in the head? Because at the end of the day, these systems will not work if you do not have the token. If portions of the token are not used, the network does not move. The network requires a little bit of the token to work. And if it doesn't get any of that burn or any of that transfer, the network does not move. So it's kind of like gas. But some of these networks have a finite number of it. So that means you can't create more of it or less of it. That's why that Supreme Court decision ruling is important. Because if a blockchain has a ruling mechanism, that means they can control how much they create of it and how much they destroy of it. So it's really weird, especially when you learn about the financial system and you understand that our entire market is built off of debt. Like, there is no real money. Like, debt's a good thing. Debt's a good thing because somehow you can just pull more money out of that from the future, and then you can pull that money from the future into the present, and it's like, ooh, magic. And then people are telling me, oh, I would much rather have the normal banking system that we have now. That's more trusted. I'm like, shut the fuck up. Everything that you can do with the dollar, like, eventually you'll be able to do with cryptocurrency. It just looks fucking scary because we don't understand programming language. It's almost like keeping the American population stupid at a time where it is now required for you to understand programming language. Wow, like, funny how that works, right? Yo, we need these niggas stupid. Like, we need a dummy dick. So that's the way I see it. They priced you out. They outsmarted you out of this new emerging class. Now you can't program. Now you don't know anything about the infrastructure level things. That we've effectively been kicked out of this market space. Of this, like, I don't even know. People like to say that, like, oh, it's going to be like the internet boom. A lot of these things are going to disappear. And I'm like, not really. If you make a good piece of code and you, what is it? There's open licenses where, yeah, your piece of code is out for Gibbs and out for people to use, but you could still leverage over people and be like, hey, I don't want you to use my code. Like, we're in a very new age of woo-woo that we haven't fully understood of what's going on. So I don't believe that Charles Schwab is winning. If anything, I don't even think any of them are walking amongst us because they know they lost. They know they lost so badly that they'd rather have these doubles handle everything. Everything. And that's even if you believe that they're still in control. Because I don't. Like, I paid attention to what happened in 2018. I paid attention to how every time a very specific entity from a very specific forum website, anytime that thing or that entity said something or revealed something or a new piece of information was then dissected into the population or disseminated in the population, and the smarter people got, right? That was something very unique that I saw. And I've only ever seen it a very few times. When WikiLeaks first started happening, that was the first time we ever saw a news organization say, you're not allowed to read these documents. It is illegal for you to read these documents. And it's like, no, it's not. This is journalism. This is muckraking at its finest, exposing bullshit. But CNN was like, no, you can't read that. That's illegal. You can't do that. Then we also saw it with, again, Libya, Egypt. Just me watching it from a 4chan perspective. And then just to see the demonization that happened to 4chan from like the year 2009 to 2014. Like there was a time where I would refuse, like if I trusted you, like I would tell you like, oh yeah, I used to hang out on 4chan. Like there was a level of demonization that would occur at that level. To see it again in 2018, to see it again with like anytime Trump said anything, anytime there was like something related to what Q said, the Q clock, anything. Anytime I saw the forum get smarter, move the goalpost a little further, get closer to the goalpost, what did we see on the other side? We saw the other side react. They would then move the goalpost, and they would intercept. Like I would actively hang out on Discord groups where I'm talking to just random people. But then all of a sudden, these random people are now up to date with something that, like if you're not up to date, and I mean up to date, some of these people would catch you off guard because it's just like, dude, this news or this piece of information just came out like an hour ago. Why are you here in a group full of strangers now trying to set a precedent on this new piece of information, but through your lens, through the lens that benefits the left or the, it's not even that benefits the left or the right. It's more that the information is disseminated in a way where it plays into the checkerboard. You're either on black or you're either on white. You're forced into this two, right? What you see in what is it? What's that lyric? It's like what you read in black, I read in white. What you see in something, read between the gray. Like, I don't know. It's a very interesting line that I remember reading. But being forced into this two-world paradigm where it's either black or white. There is no nuance. There is no this. There is no that. And I only ever saw that kind of, I don't know, I call it a game. The only time I ever saw the institution, the elite, the mainstream media, the deep state, whatever you want to call it. I call it the institution. I call it this weird thing that just exists where there's this invisible thread of like allegiance, like people will not question the authority figure. It's just something that I've always noticed as a kid, that they will never question the authority figure. They'll never, it won't go past a certain amount. So again, with science, trust the science. And you won't go further than that. Like if a doctor tells you to take this medication, or if the doctor tells you to do this procedure, it just only goes that far. Like it's almost like an invisible barrier that you hit, and you're just like, oh, I can't go further than this. And it's just like, no, how about you question it? How about you try to figure out if there's any alternatives? Oh, no. Trust the science. Like, take this medication for HIV. Yeah, thanks, Fauci. Either way. You know, that should have been a big scandal. Should have lost his job right then and there, but he kept sitting in that position all the way from Reagan all the way to present day. And nobody puts two and two together that, so if he was in that position and he was handling all of the affairs of health, what epidemics did we have from now to then? And every single one, he was there. Every single new vaccine trial that happened. My favorite one was the smallpox. This was like 2012 to 2014. They introduced a new form of a vaccine. It was for smallpox. But any adult who took that literally got shingles. And what did we see now? And I'm like, oh, dude, this is weird. This is all weird. But it all happened under one single person's authority. But people want to obfuscate that and be like, oh no, Operation Warp Speed. And I'm like, you know, we can say that. We can be all hunky-dory about that. But let's actually discuss the issue at hand, which is if Trump, like if we go with the alternative now, especially after being 2 years, if Trump would have called it bullshit then, at the time of mass hysteria, at the time after watching all those stupid videos that came out of China, are you really going to tell me that people back then were going to accept the answer that this is bullshit and they shouldn't care about it? No, because hysteria has proven one thing. It's all just gas to the pedal. Oh, I gotta believe what's going on. And when it comes down to science, there is that level of I have to trust the doctor. He must know. He has all the answers. Meanwhile, we reject other science like Dr. Sevi, right? He is somebody who won against the Supreme Court. He won against the Supreme Court in a decision that was what? Can he cure cancer or not? He went to the court. He showed all of his patients. He showed all the proof he had. And guess what? He walked away a free man. He won that case. Imagine that. Getting sued by like the highest court in the land. Only for you to walk away with the victory under your belt. And for you to exist for decades on after that. And only for you to disappear when somebody decides to make a documentary about you at a time where it would have completely destroyed, the next level. Again, I really don't think they were planning on doing the biowarfare this early on. I think they were actually going to nudge into the biowarfare little by little, because there were still things that they didn't understand. And kind of something very telling to me was learning about IBM and how they were directly involved with concentration camps in Germany. So the identification numbers that they were getting on their wrist, all of those were processed using IBM computers, right? So when there was like this environmentalism, basically there was an environmentalism movement that occurred in the early 1900s. During that movement, eugenics kind of popped in and were like, hey, we care about the environment, and we care about the environment so much that we want to cull certain gene groups out of the population because it's bad for the environment. They would be a cost to society if they were allowed to live. That's literally what they were arguing against, right? So there was this mending between environmentalism and geneticists, and how they wanted to see how they can. It's kind of what allowed for GMO. It's kind of what allowed for the chemistry of the Bureau of Chemistry to get turned into the FDA. There's so much research that I've done into this. And it's kind of where I've been now recently, because I've just been so depressed that I had to just put all it down and be like, you know what? I've read too much of this. I'm really sad now because I don't know how to put it. Like, what I read perfectly ties in to what's going on right now. And I have to actually mentally accept that I know people that are going to pass away. And it's not a very nice feeling. So I decided to I backed off from society. I was like, fuck this, dude. Holy fuck. Either way. Yeah, all of this has history. Why Fauci is the way he is has history all the way back as the early 1900s, the 1920s. Like, Franklin D. Roosevelt, the nigga we all assume to be like some great guy, like, he was a full-on environmentalist. And that literally means he was a full-on geneticist too. And it is baffling to me that I can't remember the audio recording. I need to find it. I really need to find this audio recording. Because it would actively show you that what you would see on the Senate record, right? There's always like a notary person kind of like writing down everything that's being said amongst the senators, House representatives, blah, 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 blah. Any of these niggas, right? They would actively remove any mention of any geneticist talking point. They would actively remove it from the official record. Like it wasn't a whole lot of them. There were I want to say like seven people that I pointed out that were very adamant eugenicists. They got invited to speak at the House. They were constantly invited to these parties amongst senators. It was more prevalent here in California, especially. But they would actively remove any mentioning of what these people were really about. And that's crazy to me. That's absolutely crazy to me. Because, okay, what people don't understand is that the reason why this is absolutely crazy to me is because I currently see a lot. I've met a lot of people on the internet. I've met a lot of people from 4chan. And a lot of them have sympathies for Hitler. A lot of them have sympathies for this weird thing that he was trying to do. He was trying to save us and this and that, right? They have this weird belief system that he was a good guy. Like, it's kind of funny, right? Like, the same thing that you see Trumpers say about Trump is the same thing you'll see about these internet groups that'll say that about Hitler. Weird parallel, right? There's an even weirder parallel when you look at Napoleon, and I don't even want to go there. Don't even want to go there. It's just like, wow, it's almost like this narrative just kind of repeats amongst these people that display these certain qualities. I'm still a Trump guy. Just keep that in mind, right? Look at me. I'm gonna vote for that nigga. Even though his wife, like, how do you get something that looks like a punch to the chest and then, I don't know. Either way too in the woo for that shit. Where was I going? Eugenicist. So if you do any meaningful research into Hitler, you find out that he was a really big fan of this guy named Madison Grant. Madison Grant. If you type that into the search bar in Google, you will literally get schools across the United States. We have schools named after this guy. And I think one of his most famous books was defending the superior race or some shit, defending the Nordic race. I don't know. Madison Grant was basically one of the few proponents that perpetuated this thing of Aryan race, superiority amongst the genes, kind of led this whole thing of understanding the human genome and understanding recessive genes with non-recessive genes, etc., etc. Like, this is the guy. That's the dude. Madison Grant. That's the guy. If you ever want to care about anybody in that sphere, Madison Grant is your guy. And if you look at Hitler, Hitler has actual letters written to this nigga, right? But when I start really dissecting this fool's materials, when you start realizing that he absolutely hated anybody that wasn't the original inheritors of America. Absolutely detested anything that wasn't I don't know what other way to put it. Like, so there were I guess I could pull it up right now. I'm 50 minutes in. Fuck this shit. I'll do that in the next stream. But there were 6 predominant nations that essentially created the first 13 colonies. I'm going to try to pull them off my head. One of them was the French that used the tulip, the Netherlands, the Scots, but they were specific. Like, there's this emblem that I have. I drew something based off of it, and it had the 6 original emblems from the nations where these people were coming from, right? And if you were not from these specific lineages, Madison Grant saw you as a problem. And they essentially, him and any of his cohort, anybody related to this Madison Grant dude, like, he literally, all right, one of the things that they did, kicker, they would design the IQ test. They had a variety of IQ tests, but they were designing it specifically to keep out any Eastern European. Like, if they knew that these people were illiterate, they would actively make the IQ test in such a way to make sure that they didn't come over. That was one of the very few things they did. Another thing that these people did was they had so like the whole, you want to know where the free candy van came from? Came from them. The whole free candy thing came from them going around certain towns looking for people with certain kind of qualities. If you had red hair, brown hair, if you had anything that they would consider a recessive gene, they would go around town in a van and they would tell the kids, hey kids, you want some money to go watch the flicks? You want some candy? You want this? You want that? Oh, you just got to take this shot. You just got to take this medicine real quick. There's instances of this throughout the early 1900s of them actively going out of their way to try to euthanize portions of the population just because you were either Eastern European or you had certain recessive traits that they deemed unworthy. And this shit went full on up until Hitler, when Hitler really went full fucking throttle to the pedal, dude. By then, eugenicists changed their name. And eugenicists turned into human, the study of human something. Either way, they completely recessed back and decided to hide out. And basically, the people who created the institutions as we know them now were people, right? The people who laid out the foundation for science to be the way it is are all these human geneticists that went into hiding after Hitler did what he did. After Hitler did what he did, they realized, oh, we can't call ourselves this anymore. We gotta really hide out. And now, with the way that the new vagine is kind of going out, we're seeing people develop health problems that are directly linked to recessive genes. And yet nobody's putting two and two together. And I'm sitting here like, right, it's worse than that, right? We're getting a lot of foreign substances. But the whole point is, this whole, the study of RNA, the study of DNA, this shit has been going on for a very long time. And it's kind of sad for me to say this, but it's actually, I don't want to say it's the backbone of America, but it's the backbone of the current America we have now. Because if you know anything about alternative history, and if you know anything about Tartaria, you would know that the 1800s are a very contested time period. Very contested. Like, I don't know. That's where I'm at. I'm probably going to go back into my hidey hole and just hermit out because honestly, like, I can't stop myself from researching this. Just gotta keep, I just keep going in deeper. I just can't stop. And it just makes me so sad to just, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that I'm questioning my belief in like doctors or in science or in this or that. It's just, it's really hard for me to believe that people were so willing to just, oh, that person clearly knows what he's doing. Let's just leave it up to him. That gets me really sad. And more because I know somebody, just a lot of it has to do with the fact that like I know people who are in situations dealing with the aspects of the medical industry, and I'm just kind of like, wow, this is who we're trusting. I just did a basic overview of a certain portion of history that related to something that I was researching with the conspiracy that I'm following. But I think the best, most recent study that I can point to is, I can't remember what, I think it was the College of Boulder, or it was the university. It was a university in Colorado where they did a study where they decided to see how many scientific research articles, or how much of the science articles that are in these universities, how many of them are true. And it was well over 50% that they couldn't replicate any of the studies that were peer reviewed. So it's like, so we have over 50% of scientific research that can't be replicated, and we're okay with moving ahead with the science the way it is. And yeah, and the reason why is I think Dr. Malone put it best, where we have all these institutions that will fund all of these scientists, but the scientists don't care. The moment the research is done, the institution will come in, hand them the check, take all the research material, and the institution themselves will file it. That's where we're at. And that's where we've been at since the 70s, ever since kind of like American schools here got federalized. Yeah. I'll see you guys some other time. I don't know if anytime soon. I had way too much on my mind, and I didn't even actually get to express anything. Actually, I think I did, actually. I got bricks. I got all the fires, the revolutions. Yeah, I just ended on a really heavy note. But yeah, hopefully I'll be back.